I'm Rebecca, trapped in a crumbling marriage in a forgotten corner of Ohio, where the days drag on like a slow bleed. My husband Victor and I are drowning in unpaid bills and unspoken resentments, our home a battlefield of silence and secrets. But beneath the mundane ache of our life, a sinister undercurrent stirs. Strange men in dark suits lurking, their cold stares piercing through the cracks of our fragile world. My gut screams that something's wrong, terribly wrong, as Victor's haunted eyes betray a truth he won't speak. What has he done? And how far will it drag me into the abyss? Stick around, because the answer might just shatter everything I thought I knew. Picture this: a world where the quiet hum of a suburban street feels like a lullaby, but beneath it, there's a pulse of something darker, something waiting to break free. I'm Rebecca, 45 years old, living in a sleepy corner of Ohio where the days blend into one another like faded photographs. My life, on the surface, is as plain as the peeling paint on the outside of our small, weathered house. It's a place that's seen better days, much like my marriage to Victor, my husband of 18 years. He's 48, a mechanic with hands stained by grease and a heart weighed down by dreams that never quite took off. Money's always been a struggle, a silent storm brewing between us. Our garage is his sanctuary, a cluttered mess of old car parts and half-finished projects where he spends hours, lost in his own world. I work part-time as a receptionist at a local dentist's office, a job that barely keeps the lights on, but gives me a sliver of independence. It's mundane, answering phones, scheduling appointments, but it's mine. Our neighborhood, though, has its shadows. I've noticed two men around town, always dressed in dark suits, their presence like a cold wind on a summer day. Marcus, a burly figure in his late 30s, has a gravelly voice that rumbles like distant thunder, and a scar across his left cheek that tells stories I don't want to hear. Then there's Ethan, leaner, in his early 40s, with sharp eyes that seem to calculate every move, every word. They knock on doors, make folks uneasy, and though I don't know their business yet, their stares linger in. I'll never forget that rainy evening when everything started to unravel. The sound of the downpour was a steady drum against the roof as Victor pushed through the front door, his heavy boots dragging mud across the linoleum floor of our kitchen. I looked up from the stack of overdue bills on the counter, my stomach already twisting with frustration, and saw him, really saw him. His hands were smeared with grease, as always, but there was something else, something worse. Dark circles hung under his eyes like storm clouds, and his jaw twitched nervously, a tic I hadn't noticed before. He looked like a man carrying a weight I couldn't see, and it scared me more than I wanted to admit. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I held up the bills, my voice sharper than I meant it to be, and asked why we were so behind again. He'd promised to get a second job, swore we'd catch up, but here we were, drowning in red ink. His eyes flashed with irritation, and he snapped at me, his voice rough as gravel. Told me to stop nagging, to give him a damn break. Before I could say another word, he turned on his heel and stormed off to the garage, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, the bills still in my hand, feeling the silence press in around me, heavier than the rain outside. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Victor was different, distant, jumpy. I'd catch him whispering into his phone in the corner of the house, his voice low and urgent, or glancing over his shoulder like he expected someone to be watching. My gut told me to dig. I'm standing in the living room, my hands shaking so bad I can barely keep them at my sides. The air feels thick, suffocating, as I stare down Victor, my voice cracking with raw emotion. I demand to know what's really going on, why Marcus and Ethan have been lurking around our house like vultures circling prey. Victor's face is pale, his eyes darting to the floor like he's searching for a way out of this mess. Marcus, leaning against the wall, smirks with that cold, calculating grin of his, arms crossed over his broad chest. Ethan, silent as ever, watches from the corner, his sharp gaze cutting through the tension like a blade. I can feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a hammer against my ribs, as I wait for Victor to speak. Finally, he breaks. His voice is low, trembling, as he confesses the truth I never saw coming. He owes 12 grand, $12,000, from a gambling debt he's been hiding for over a year. Underground poker rings, late-night games in shady basements, the kind of places I never imagined he'd step foot in. I'm stunned, my mind reeling. Gambling? Victor? The man who could barely risk $1 on a lottery ticket? I open my mouth to say something, anything, but the words stick in my throat. Then he drops the real bomb, his voice barely a whisper, like he's ashamed to even say it out loud. He doesn't have the money to pay it off. So, to settle the debt, he offered me as collateral to Marcus and Ethan. The room spins, my knees buckle, and I grab the edge of the couch to steady myself. Collateral. Me, his wife. He tried to trade me like I'm some kind of bargaining chip, a possession to be handed over to cover his mistakes. Rage surges through me, hot and blinding, mixing with a betrayal so deep it feels like a knife twisting in my gut. My vision blurs with tears, but they're not from sadness. They're from pure, unfiltered anger. I scream at him, my voice raw and jagged, calling him a coward. The morning after that gut-wrenching confrontation with Victor, I wake up in a cheap motel room across town, the thin curtains barely holding back the gray light of dawn. My hands tremble as I sit on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the cracked screen of my phone. I've got Marcus's number memorized from that quick glance at Victor's phone a few days ago, and now it's time to use it. I take a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay even, and dial. When he picks up, that gravelly tone of his rumbles through the speaker, and I cut straight to the point. I tell him I want to meet, him and Ethan, at a diner on the other side of town to discuss terms. There's a long pause, a heavy silence that makes my skin crawl, but then he grunts an agreement, naming a time. I hang up, my stomach churning like I've just stepped off a cliff. Getting dressed feels like putting on armor. I choose a black blouse and a pair of worn jeans, nothing flashy, just simple and sharp. I need to look like I've got my head on straight, like I'm not crumbling inside. I catch my reflection in the smudged mirror. My eyes are hard, determined, but there's a flicker of fear I can't shake. My fingers fumble with the buttons, nerves buzzing under my skin like live wires. I've never done anything like this before, never played a game this dangerous, but after what Victor tried to pull, I've got no choice. I'm taking control, even if it scares me half to death. At the diner, the air smells of burnt coffee and stale grease, the kind of place where the linoleum's been scrubbed 1,000 times, but still looks grimy. I slide into a dimly lit booth across from Marcus and Ethan, their presence filling the space like a storm cloud. Marcus leans back, his scarred cheek catching the faint light, and fixes me with a skeptical stare. He asks why I'm even here, why I'd talk to them after what Victor tried to do, his voice dripping with suspicion. Ethan doesn't say a word, just watches me. I push through the door of the secluded bar, the flickering neon lights casting jagged shadows across the grimy floor. The air is thick with the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke, and an old jukebox in the corner croons a mournful country tune, its notes barely audible over the low murmur of voices. My eyes scan the dimly lit room until they land on Marcus and Ethan, tucked away at a corner table, beers in hand, their postures relaxed but their gazes sharp. My body hums with tension, every muscle coiled tight as I take deliberate steps toward them. Each footfall feels heavier than the last, like I'm walking toward a precipice, but my mind is made up. There's no hesitation, no second guessing. Not after what Victor tried to do. I slide into the chair across from them, the wood creaking under my weight, and I don't waste a single breath. My voice comes out steady, colder than I feel inside, as I tell them I'm not here to be a victim of Victor's mess. I'm not some pawn in his twisted game. Instead, I lean forward, locking eyes with each of them, and drop a bombshell that even I can hardly believe I'm saying. I offer myself to them, not as payment, not as something owed, but as a deliberate choice, a middle finger to Victor's betrayal. This is me taking the reins, proving I'm the one who decides my fate, not him. Marcus lets out a surprised chuckle, the sound rough and low, like he didn't see this coming. Ethan, though, just tilts his head, a slow, intrigued smile curling at the edges of his lips, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. The air between us crackles, charged with a raw, unspoken intensity. I make it clear this is on my terms, my rules. This isn't about surrender. It's about reclaiming every shred of autonomy Victor tried to strip away. My heart thunders in my chest, but I don't flinch. I can't. Not now. We finish our drinks in near silence, the weight of my words hanging over us like a storm ready to break. Then, it's been a few days since that night at the bar, and I'm still holed up in this rundown motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the air smells of stale cigarette smoke. I've been keeping my distance from Victor, ignoring the missed calls and texts lighting up my phone. I can't face him. Not yet. Not after everything. The silence here is suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional creak of the building settling. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the chipped paint on the wall, when I hear it. A pounding on the door so fierce it rattles the frame. My stomach drops. I don't need to look through the peephole to know who it is. I crack the door open just enough to see Victor standing there, his face flushed a deep, angry red, veins bulging at his temples. His fists are clenched, and he's shouting before I can even get a word out, accusing me of humiliating him, of betraying him with Marcus and Ethan. Word got back to him through someone we both know, and now he's here, spitting venom, saying I've ruined everything. I stand my ground, my voice icy and unyielding as I stare into his furious eyes through the narrow gap. I tell him he lost the right to judge me the moment he tried to trade me like I was nothing more than a piece of property to settle his debts. His mouth opens, then closes, like he's grasping for something to hit back with, but I don't give him the chance. I cut deeper, telling him I'm filing for divorce, that I'm done letting him drag me into his mess. I'm breaking free, once and for all. His face twists with rage and something like desperation, but he doesn't say another word. He just turns and storms off, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway until they fade into nothing. I shut the door, the click of the lock sounding louder than it should, and sink onto the bed, my hands trembling now that the adrenaline's fading. The past week plays over in my mind like a broken record. Every choice. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.